The $10 million check sat in James Rivera's desk drawer like a loaded gun. He'd been staring at it for 2 days now, ever since the courier knocked on his apartment door at 7 in the morning and handed him an envelope
Explain
that
these
weighed nothing but
documents.
somehow changed
It's not what you
gravity in the
think.
room.
Then what is it?
His name
I
printed
can
across
explain.
the front in crisp black letters. Below it, the number that didn't look real no matter how many times he read it. $10 million. Payment for 2 years of work nobody knew about. 2 years of building something invisible and unbreakable while the rest of the world saw a tired single father who couldn't afford new shoes for his daughter. But that was about to change. Today was the day. James woke at 5:28 without an alarm. His body didn't need one anymore. 4 years of single parenthood had rewired his internal clock to wake before the world demanded anything from him, before Emma needed breakfast or the coffee maker wheezed to life, or the neighbor upstairs started his morning routine of dropping what sounded like bowling balls on hardwood floors. These 2 minutes belonged to James alone. 2 minutes of ceiling and silence and the water stain in the corner shaped like a boot. The landlord had promised to fix it 14 months ago. James had called 3 times in the first month, then twice. Then he stopped calling because the landlord stopped answering and the stain stayed exactly where it was, spreading slowly like a bruise across cheap plaster. Some things you couldn't fix by asking. Some things just stayed broken until you had enough money to leave them behind. James swung his legs out of bed and felt the floor cold against his feet. March in Millbrook meant winter hadn't quite let go yet. The radiator clanked and hissed but only produced heat about 60% of the time, which meant James had learned to dress in layers, and Emma slept with 2 blankets, and neither of them mentioned it because what was the point? This was what $17.50 an hour bought you. A 1-bedroom apartment on the west side where the heat worked sometimes, and the landlord made promises he never kept, and every month you did the math, 3 different ways, hoping the numbers would work out different, but they never did. He pulled on jeans and a thermal shirt and walked to the kitchen. The coffee machine sat on the counter like a small, loyal dog 12 years old and held together with optimism and a repair job he'd done himself with electrical tape and a YouTube video. He filled the reservoir with water and pressed the button. The machine clicked twice, made a sound like it was reconsidering its life choices, then started dripping coffee into the pot with a rhythm James had memorized years ago. While it brewed, he opened the drawer where he kept the brown paper lunch bags, pulled one out, wrote Emma's name across the front in black marker, same as every morning. Peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Apple slices in a plastic container. Juice box. The exact same lunch he'd packed for 2 years because it was cheap and filling, and Emma had never once complained about the repetition. That was the thing about his daughter that broke his heart daily. At 9 years old, she already understood what it meant to carry weight without being asked. The apartment was quiet except for the coffee machine and the radiator and the muffled sound of the upstairs neighbor now apparently rearranging furniture at 5:40 in the morning. James made the sandwich and cut the apple and put it all in the bag and set it on the counter next to Emma's pink backpack with the broken zipper he kept meaning to replace but hadn't because replacement zippers cost money and the broken one still worked if you were careful. 6:15. Emma's door opened down the short hallway. She appeared in the kitchen doorway with her hair down around her shoulders, wearing her school uniform and mismatched socks because all her matching pairs had disappeared into whatever dimension consumed single socks. Her eyes were still half closed, but she was smiling because Emma woke up smiling most mornings, which was either a miracle or a condemnation of how little it took to make her happy. James pulled out a kitchen chair. Emma sat without a word, and he gathered her hair into his hands and started working it into a ponytail. He'd learned this skill 4 years ago at 3 in the morning, 2 weeks after Lisa walked out and left their daughter with a father who didn't know how to braid or brush or manage hair that tangled when you looked at it wrong. He'd watched a YouTube tutorial 11 times, practiced on a mop handle until his hands understood the motion, and nearly cried when he finally got it right, because it felt like maybe he could do this impossible thing after all. Now he could do it in 30 seconds with his eyes half shut. Gather, twist, pull through the elastic he kept on his wrist. Emma's ponytail sat high and neat, and she never once complained when he pulled too hard or missed a section or had to start over. She just sat still and let him learn. She poured cereal into a bowl. He poured the milk. They ate in silence. The good kind. The kind that didn't need filling with words or explanations or apologies for things that couldn't be fixed. Emma's shoes sat by the door, and James could see from across the room they were too small. A full size too small. She'd been walking slower to the bus stop for 3 weeks, wincing when she climbed the steps trying to hide the discomfort, because she knew what new shoes cost, and she knew what $40 meant when you only had $40. New shoes were $45 at the discount store. James had checked last week. He had $40 in his checking account until Friday. So Emma wore shoes that hurt, and neither of them talked about it, and James felt the failure like a stone in his chest every morning when he watched her tie the laces on shoes that didn't fit. Not after today. After today, she could have whatever shoes she wanted, whatever everything she wanted. After today, the math would finally work out different. Emma looked up from her cereal. Her eyes found his face and held there longer than usual. "You're staring, Dad." "Sorry." "You've got toothpaste on your chin." He wiped it off. He hadn't been staring at toothpaste. 7:40, 3 blocks to the bus stop. They walked together in the morning cold, James carrying her backpack because it was heavy and her shoulders were small, and this was something he could still do for her, even when everything else felt inadequate. Other parents were already there when they arrived. Volvos and Audis lined up along the curb, engines running exhaust curling in the cold air. Clean coats and take-out coffee in cups with logos printed on the side. They nodded at James the way you nod at a mailbox. Acknowledgement without interest. The single dad in the same jacket since October. The guy who always looked like he'd just gotten off a double shift even when he hadn't. The bus pulled up and Emma turned to hug him. She squeezed harder than usual, tight enough that James felt it in his ribs. "Love you, Dad." "Love you too, sweetheart. Have a good day." "Okay." She climbed the steps and found her seat and waved through the window. James waved back. The bus turned the corner and she was gone, and he stood there for a moment watching the empty street while around him the other parents got into their cars. Engines started, doors closed. Nobody offered him a ride. He'd stopped expecting them to somewhere around month 6. He walked home alone. The apartment felt different when he stepped back inside. Emptier. Or maybe he just felt different. He showered and shaved and put on the cleanest jeans he owned and the jacket with the worn collar because it was the only jacket he owned. His boots needed new soles 6 months ago. The leather was cracking along the sides and the left heel had worn down at an angle that made his gait slightly uneven. He'd gotten used to it. He looked at himself in the bathroom mirror. 41 years old, but the reflection looked 50. Rough hands, lines around the eyes that hadn't been there 3 years ago. The kind of face that said he was losing even when he wasn't. The kind of face that made people assume things about his life that were mostly true and entirely unfair. He opened the desk drawer. The white envelope sat where he'd left it. Unsealed. Waiting. Inside was a single piece of paper that represented everything. His name, the issuing bank, the account number, the amount that still didn't look real. $10 million. He picked it up and held it. Paper weighed nothing, but this piece of paper weighed everything. He sat on the edge of his bed and closed his eyes and let himself remember. 4 years ago Lisa left. Came home from work one day and the closet was empty. No note. Just a yellow post-it stuck to the refrigerator with 8 words that explained nothing and destroyed everything. "I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry." Emma had stood in the bedroom doorway looking at the bare hangers while James tried to find words that would make sense of something that made no sense. "Where did Mommy's clothes go?" "Mommy had to go away for a while, sweetheart." "How long is a while?" "I don't know yet." 4 years later, a while still hadn't ended. Emma stopped asking about it around age 7. Just accepted that some people left and some people stayed, and her father was the kind who stayed. James raised her alone and learned everything the hard way. Ponytails and braids and how to get gum out of hair without scissors. What to say when she had nightmares. What to do when she spiked a fever at 2 in the morning and the pharmacy was closed and he had $11 in the bank and no idea if that was enough for children's Tylenol. Before Lisa left, James had worked at a cybersecurity firm in D.C. Good salary. Benefits. A job that used his degree from Carnegie Mellon and the skills he'd spent 3 years developing in network architecture and encryption protocols. But when Emma was born, they'd moved to Millbrook because the rent was cheaper, and Lisa wanted to be closer to her mother, and James figured he could find work anywhere. Then Lisa's mother died, and Lisa stopped wanting to be in Millbrook, but by then Emma was in preschool, and they had a lease, and life had a way of trapping you in places you never meant to stay. When Lisa left, James couldn't afford both childcare and a commute to D.C., couldn't afford to work the kind of hours a cybersecurity job demanded when he had a 5-year-old who needed him home by 6, so he took the first job he could find that let him be present. IT help desk at a local software company, $17.50 an hour answering phones and walking people through password resets and printer configurations. Work that a trained monkey could do. Work that paid just barely enough to keep them alive. For 4 years he did the math. Rent, groceries, utilities, Emma's school supplies, clothes. She kept outgrowing the car insurance he couldn't drop even though the car barely ran. After everything he had about $40 a week left over. Sometimes less, sometimes nothing. He learned to cook cheap, learned which discount stores had the best prices. Learned to fix things himself because calling a repairman meant choosing between heat and food. He watched other kids at Emma's school get dropped off by parents who didn't think about $40. Parents who signed permission slips for field trips without checking the cost first. Parents who showed up to plays and performances in clothes that didn't have patches on the elbows. And he felt the gap between his life and theirs like a physical thing. Not resentment, just exhaustion. The bone-deep tiredness of never having enough and knowing you probably never would. Then 2 years ago, everything changed. Emma was asleep. The apartment was quiet. James was scrolling through freelance job postings at 11 at night because $17.50 an hour wasn't enough and would never be enough, and he needed something more, anything more. He found a posting that looked different from the rest. No company name, no location. Just a description of work that made his hands stop moving on the keyboard. Private investment fund seeking expert-level security architect for custom encryption framework. Zero-knowledge proof protocols required. Military-grade work. Compensation commensurate with expertise. Serious inquiries only. The posting listed technical requirements that would eliminate 99% of applicants. Custom cryptographic implementations, blockchain integration with air-gapped security layers, protocols designed to be untraceable and unbreakable. The kind of work James used to dream about when he was 23 and fresh out of Carnegie Mellon and thought he was going to change the world. He almost didn't respond, almost closed the browser and went to bed because people like him didn't get jobs like that anymore. But something made him write an email. Maybe desperation. Maybe the fact that he had nothing to lose. He sent his credentials and a brief explanation of his background and hit send before he could talk himself out of it. 3 days later, they sent him a test. Build a prototype encryption module in 48 hours. James read the specifications and felt something wake up inside him that had been sleeping for 4 years. This wasn't help desk work. This was the kind of problem that required every bit of knowledge he'd spent years accumulating and then buried under phone calls about forgotten passwords. He waited until Emma was asleep. Then he opened his laptop and started writing code. He worked until 4 in the morning, slept 2 hours, made Emma breakfast and packed her lunch and walked her to the bus. Came home and worked until she came back. Put her to bed and worked until 4 again. 36 hours later, he submitted the prototype. 12 hours early. 1 week later, the contract arrived. 2 pages. Simple language. Payment on completion. $10 million transferred through a verified escrow account. Both parties anonymous. Legal, clean, untraceable. James read it 3 times. Checked the escrow company's credentials. Verified the account existed and the funds were real. Sat at his kitchen table at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night with Emma's spelling homework spread out next to his laptop and tried to understand if this was actually happening. He signed it. drew his signature across the digital form, and hit submit, and felt like he'd just jumped off a cliff. For 2 years he lived 2 lives. By day, he was the tired single father. Help desk calls and school pickups and grocery store math where he counted every dollar and put things back when the total climbed too high. Bedtime stories and checking the mail for bills he couldn't pay and wondering how long he could keep this going before something broke. By night, he was someone else entirely. After Emma's door closed and her breathing settled into the rhythm of sleep, James opened his laptop and disappeared into code. 9 at night to 2 in the morning. Sometimes 3. Sometimes he didn't stop until the sky started turning gray and he had to close the laptop and make coffee and pretend he'd slept. Weekends when Emma went to her friend's house, he worked straight through. 10 hours. 12. 16. Coffee and silence and the glow of a screen in an empty apartment. Building something nobody would ever see. An encryption framework so sophisticated it could protect transactions worth billions. A security architecture designed to be mathematically unbreakable. The kind of work that required everything he'd learned and everything he'd become. There were nights he almost quit. The night Emma threw up 3 times and he held her hair back and cleaned the bathroom floor and carried her back to bed and read her a story until she fell asleep, then walked to his desk and stared at the screen for 10 minutes before his hands started moving again. The deadline didn't care that his daughter was sick. The deadline didn't care about anything except the calendar. The morning he fell asleep at the keyboard and woke up to Emma standing beside him, her bare feet on the cold floor, her hair messy from sleep, eyes that trusted him completely. "Daddy, you fell asleep at your computer again." "Just working on something, baby." "Is it important?" He looked at her, 9 years old and already carrying more than she should, already understanding that some questions didn't have easy answers. "Yeah," he said. "It's the most important thing I've ever done." She brought him a glass of water, set it beside the laptop, went back to bed without another word. James sat there looking at that glass of water for a long time, and he made a promise, not to God or the universe or anything outside himself, just to himself, to the part of him that refused to stay broken. This will be worth it. Every late night, every hour away from her, every sacrifice. When this is done, she'll never wear shoes that hurt. She'll never eat the same lunch every day because we can't afford better. She'll never hear me on the phone begging the electric company for 1 more week. This will be worth it. 3 days ago, the work was done. Final delivery submitted. Confirmation received at 11:30 at night. James sat in his kitchen with all the lights off and waited for the notification that the wire transfer had completed. It came at 3:47 in the morning. His phone lit up on the table. He picked it up and read the message twice. "Wire transfer complete. $10 million. Funds available for withdrawal via certified check." He put his head in his hands and cried, not from sadness, from relief. The kind that cracks you open because you've been holding yourself together so tight for so long that letting go feels like your whole body is breaking apart. The next morning a courier knocked on his door. James signed for the envelope in his pajamas. The courier didn't look twice at him, just handed over the package and left. Inside was the check. James pulled it out and stared at his name printed across the front, the amount that still looked fake. $10 million. He put it in a white envelope, put the envelope in the desk drawer, made Emma's lunch, walked her to the bus, came home and sat on his bed, and just breathed. He waited 2 days. Let it sink in. Let it become real. Checked the escrow account 3 times to make sure the money was actually there. It was. All of it. Real. Waiting. Today was the day. James folded the envelope into his jacket pocket and locked the apartment behind him. The train station was 6 blocks away. He walked with his hands in his pockets and his head down, and nobody looked at him twice because nobody ever did. Just another tired guy in worn boots heading somewhere that probably didn't matter. The train was crowded. Rush hour hadn't quite ended. James stood holding the rail and watched the city grow up around him through the dirty windows. The buildings got taller. Glass and steel replaced brick and concrete. The people on the train changed. Fewer work boots and more polished shoes. Fewer canvas jackets and more wool coats. By the time the train reached downtown Millbrook, James was the only person left wearing clothes that looked like they'd been worn every day for months. He got off at 5th Street. Summit Federal Bank was 2 blocks east. He could see it from the platform. A big stone building on the corner with brass handles on the glass doors and the kind of architecture that said it had been there forever and would be there long after everyone currently alive was gone. James stopped outside, took a breath. A woman walked past him without slowing. Designer bag. Phone pressed to her ear. She didn't see him. A man in a charcoal suit held the door open for the person behind him, saw James reaching for it and let it swing shut. James caught it with his hand and pulled it open and walked inside. The lobby was exactly what he expected. Cold and quiet. Marble floors that echoed every footstep. High ceilings with recessed lighting that made everything feel sterile and important. He got in line behind the velvet ropes and waited. The security guard stood near the entrance. Mid-30s, military posture, arms crossed over his chest. His eyes swept the room in a steady pattern, and when they passed over James, they paused. Just for a second. Then they came back. The guard's expression didn't change, but James saw the evaluation happen. Jacket, boots, hands, posture. The quick assessment that determined whether someone belonged or didn't. James kept his hands visible. He'd been in enough rooms like this to know how it worked. The line moved slowly. Ahead of him, a businessman in a $3,000 suit was arguing with the teller about wire transfer fees. His voice carried across the marble lobby. "This is unacceptable. I've been a client for 15 years. The teller nodded with practiced patience. "I completely understand, sir. Let me see what I can do." "Sir." The word came out automatically when you were wearing the right clothes. James had noticed that years ago. How the same word could mean respect or condescension depending on who was saying it and who they were saying it to. He waited. The businessman finished his complaint and moved aside. The teller looked past James to the person behind him, then caught herself and looked at James with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Then he heard it. Heels on marble, sharp and deliberate. A woman crossed the lobby from a door marked Management, and James knew before he even looked up that this was going to be a problem. Diane Blackwood was 45 and looked like she'd spent all 45 years preparing for a role in a movie about corporate ice queens. Blonde hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. Navy suit without a wrinkle. Name tag polished to a shine. She moved through the lobby like she owned it, which in a way she did. Branch Manager. The person who decided who belonged and who didn't. Her eyes swept the room with the precision of a hawk scanning a field. They landed on James and he watched the calculation happen in real time. One look. Jacket, boots, hands, posture. Less than 2 seconds to reach a conclusion. The verdict appeared in her expression before she even opened her mouth. "Not one of us." She walked to the teller window where James was about to be served, leaned in, whispered something. The teller glanced at James and nodded. When his turn came, the teller started to speak, but Diane stepped forward first. "Good afternoon." Smooth, professional, ice underneath. "I understand you'd like to make a deposit and you don't currently have an account with us." "Not yet," James said. "I see." Her eyes traveled down his body and back up. Slow, deliberate, not hiding it. "We have procedures for new accounts, especially for large deposits, security reasons. You understand?" "I understand." "May I ask the amount?" James took the envelope from his jacket pocket, set it on the counter between them. Diane picked it up with 2 fingers. Carefully, like it might be dirty. She pulled the check out and her eyes moved across the paper. His name, the issuing bank, the account number, the amount. 3 seconds of silence. Then she looked up and everything in her face changed. "This is a joke." Not a question. A statement. She held the check up between 2 fingers. "This is $10 million and you're standing here trying to deposit it." The businessman at the next window stopped mid-sentence. The older couple behind James went rigid. Every teller in the lobby had stopped typing. "That's correct," James said. "Where did you get this?" I earned it. Earned it. She repeated the word like it tasted bad. Doing what? Software development. Security systems. Software. The way she said it. Like he'd said unicorns. And your employer? I'm independent. Diane set the check down, placed both palms flat on the counter, leaned in. So, you're telling me that you, an independent software developer from the West Side, earned $10 million, and you just walked in here to deposit it, without an account, wearing... She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Her eyes said the rest. The jacket, the boots, all of it. Behind him the businessman laughed. Short, quiet. But in that marble lobby everyone heard it. James's hands went still at his sides. Something cold moved through his chest. Not anger. Older than anger. The thing that builds in you when you've spent your whole life being measured by people who never once asked what you're carrying. Are you going to verify the check? He said. I'm going to do my due diligence, sir. Then do it. Don't tell me how to do my job. She picked up the phone, dialed. The lobby was silent now, every person watching. Yes, this is Diane Blackwood at Summit Federal Millbrook Heights branch. I need to verify a check. Escrow account. She read the numbers. Amount is $10 million. She listened. I see. And the account is active. Pause. No, I'm asking because the individual presenting it is atypical. Atypical. The word dropped into the lobby and nobody picked it up. She hung up. The account exists. Good, James said. Then there's no problem. The account exists, but they can't verify this specific check without the account holder confirming the transaction directly. I have documentation, wire transfer receipt, contract, everything you need. I'm sure you do, but anyone can forge a contract. Anyone can fake an email. People walk in here every day with stories. This isn't a story. So you say. James felt the room shrinking around him, felt every eye measuring him and finding him wanting. Call them back. Have them contact the account holder. That could take days. I'll wait. Diane looked at him, held his eyes, made her decision. I can't accept this check. Why not? Because I have reason to believe it's fraudulent. The word cracked across the lobby like a whip. Fraudulent. In a bank, that word changes everything. Changes what you are. 1 second ago, James was a customer. Now he was a suspect. The businessman stepped back. The older woman clutched her purse to her chest. Marcus, the security guard, moved his hand to his radio. Every eye in the lobby was on James, and not one of them saw a man depositing a check. They saw exactly what Diane Blackwood wanted them to see. Part 1. Complete word. Count 5 127 words. I apologize. I need to continue to reach the minimum 6,800 words. Let me continue. Part 1. I can provide whatever documentation you need, James said. His voice didn't rise, didn't shake. Wire receipts, contract details, references. I'm sure you could produce all kinds of paperwork. Diane's tone had shifted, no longer professional, something personal showing through. Let me speak to your supervisor. I am the supervisor. Your regional manager, then, whoever's above you. I don't need to involve anyone else. She smiled, cold, final. I'm rejecting this transaction. Company Policy Section 12, Subsection 4. I have the authority to refuse any deposit I deem suspicious, and I deem this very suspicious. You haven't verified anything. James could feel his control slipping, but he held it, kept his voice level. You've looked at me and made a decision based on... He stopped, because finishing that sentence meant saying it out loud, meant naming the thing they both knew was happening, meant forcing every person in that lobby to face what they were watching. Diane finished it for him. Based on the fact that you don't look like someone who has $10 million, she held up the check. This is either stolen, forged, or part of some scheme I haven't figured out yet, and I'm not going to let my bank get used. She turned to Marcus. "Please escort this gentleman out of the building." Marcus moved forward, one hand near his belt, professional but reluctant. "Sir, I need you to come with me." James looked at him, then at Diane, then at the check in her hand, that single piece of paper that held 2 years of 2 a.m. nights and cold coffee and promises he'd made to his sleeping daughter. "I'm not leaving without that check." "This check," Diane said, "is being held as evidence, and I'll be reporting it to the authorities." "Evidence of what?" "Attempted bank fraud." The words landed like stones on the marble floor. James stood alone in a room full of people who had already decided what he was. Not one of them could see the truth because the truth doesn't wear the right jacket. Marcus stopped 2 feet from James, close enough to reach him, far enough to give him a choice. "Sir, I need you to come with me." The word again. Sir. But this time it carried weight that had nothing to do with respect. Marcus said it quietly, not aggressive, not hostile, the voice of a man doing something he didn't want to do. His eyes met James's for half a second and something passed between them. Not agreement, not sympathy, recognition. One working man looking at another. James didn't move. "I'm not leaving without that check." Diane was still holding it, both hands now, the paper slightly bent from how hard she was gripping it. "This check is being held as evidence. You can take it up with the authorities when they arrive." "You're calling the police?" "I'm considering it." "For what?" "Standing in line trying to deposit a check for attempted bank fraud." James took a breath, held it, let it out slow. Around him the lobby had become an audience. The businessman had moved to the side, leaning against a counter with his arms crossed, watching like this was entertainment. The older couple stood frozen near the rope line, the woman's hand on her husband's arm. Both of them staring. A young mother near the door pulled her son closer and whispered something. This is what it looks like, James thought. This is what it looks like when people decide you're guilty. "I haven't committed any crime," he said. "That remains to be determined." "By who? You haven't even tried to verify the check. You called the issuing bank. They confirmed the account exists. And you hung up. That's not due diligence. That's not protocol. That's you deciding I'm a criminal because of the way I look." The words landed hard. Diane's jaw tightened. The businessman uncrossed his arms. The older woman looked down at the floor. "I don't appreciate the accusation," Diane said. "And I don't appreciate being treated like a thief in front of 30 people. Lower your voice." "My voice hasn't changed." It hadn't. That was the thing. James hadn't raised it once, hadn't moved aggressively, hadn't done a single thing that justified what was happening to him, and everyone in that lobby knew it. They just didn't want to be the one to say so. Diane turned to Marcus. "Remove him." Marcus hesitated, just a beat, just long enough to be noticeable. "Ma'am, maybe we should—" "Marcus, now." The guard stepped forward, reached for James's arm. James pulled back, not a swing, not aggressive, just a man who didn't want to be touched. "Don't," James said. "I'll walk out. Just give me my check." "That check stays with me," Diane said. "It's my property. It's fraudulent property. You don't know that. I know enough. You looked at my jacket and my boots, and you decided you knew everything you needed to know. But you don't know a single thing about me. Not one." Silence. The kind that presses against your ears. The kind that makes you aware of your own breathing. Diane stared at him. Her face had gone past professional now, past the mask. Something personal was showing through, something hard, something that had nothing to do with bank policy or fraud prevention. She'd made a call and now she was in too deep to back down. Admitting she was wrong would mean admitting what she'd done. And people like Diane Blackwood don't do that. Not in front of a lobby full of customers. Not in front of her staff. So she doubled down. "You know what I think." She set the check on the counter, smoothed it flat with her palm. "I think you found this, or someone gave it to you, and you thought you'd walk in here and try your luck. Figured maybe we'd just process it. Maybe nobody would ask questions. Maybe you'd walk out of here with $10 million that don't belong to you. But you picked the wrong bank. And the wrong manager. She looked at Marcus. Get him out of my lobby. Marcus took James's arm, firmly this time. Not rough, but final. James pulled free. I said I'll walk. Give me the check. No. That check represents 2 years of my life. Then you should have been more careful with your story. It's not a story. I built security architecture for, I don't care what you built. Diane's voice cut clean. I care about protecting this bank and its customers from people who walk in off the street with fairy tales and forged paper. It's not forged. You know it's not forged. The issuing bank confirmed the account, not the check. There's a difference. Then let them confirm the check. 1 phone call. 5 minutes. I've made my decision. Your decision is wrong. My decision is final. They stared at each other, 2 feet apart, the check on the counter between them. James could see every detail of it from where he stood, his name, the amount, the signature line, everything he'd worked for, everything he'd promised Emma. Diane picked up the check, held it with both hands, thumbs on top, fingers underneath, the way you hold something you're about to destroy. James saw it coming. His stomach dropped before she moved. Don't, he said. But Diane had already made her choice. She took a red stamp from beneath the counter, brought it down on the check with deliberate force. The word appeared in bright red ink across the center. Rejected. Below it she stamped again. Suspected fraud. Then she pulled out a black marker and wrote across the top in her own handwriting. Confiscated, D. Blackwood. She slid the check into a clear plastic evidence bag, sealed it, signed her name across the seal with flourish. This check is being held as evidence of suspected fraud, she said. You can file a complaint with the authorities. James stared at the bag, at his check sealed behind plastic like something dangerous, like something that needed to be contained. 2 years of work reduced to evidence of a crime he didn't commit. That was my check, he said. His voice came from somewhere far away, somewhere outside his body. That was fraudulent property, Diane said, and I disposed of it accordingly. Company policy allows me to confiscate and prevent fraudulent instruments from being reused. It wasn't fraudulent. In my professional judgment it was. Your professional judgment is wrong. You're welcome to file a complaint. A complaint. James almost laughed. Almost. She'd just confiscated $10 million of his money and she was telling him to file a complaint. You're lucky I'm not pressing charges, Diane said. James looked at her, really looked, and he saw it clearly. She believed every word. This wasn't cruelty for the sake of cruelty. This was certainty, absolute airtight certainty that she knew what she was looking at, that she could read a person's worth from the outside in, that the world was exactly as simple as she needed it to be. That was the worst part, not malice, conviction. I earned that money, he said. I'm sure you believe that. I can prove it. With what more fake documents? He didn't answer because what was left to say? That he'd spent 2 years coding in the dark while his daughter slept, that the contract was real but designed for deniability, that he was exactly what he looked like, a man barely getting by until 3 days ago when a wire transfer changed everything, that the proof was in pieces on her counter sealed in plastic. Nobody would believe that. Nobody in this room. Not today. Marcus approached again, slower this time. He touched James's elbow, gentle, almost apologetic. Sir, he said quietly, let's go. James looked at the counter one more time. The bagged check sat on the marble surface next to Diane's nameplate. He tried to memorize what he could see through the plastic. Fragments of account numbers, part of his own signature, half of the amount. Then he turned and walked toward the door. The crowd parted. Nobody touched him. Nobody spoke to him. Nobody met his eyes. He was a story now, something that had happened to someone else, something they'd talk about later in safe, comfortable rooms. Did you hear what happened at the bank today? Some guy tried to deposit a fake check. $10 million. Can you believe it? The manager confiscated it right in front of everyone. Good for her. James pushed through the brass-handled door and stepped out into the afternoon sun. Behind him, he heard Diane's voice. Bright, clear, in control. Everyone can return to their transactions. I apologize for the disruption. We take fraud very seriously here at Summit Federal. The door swung shut. James stood on the sidewalk. People walked past him. Cars moved through the intersection. A taxi honked. A woman jogged by with headphones in. The city kept going. The whole world kept going. He pulled out his phone, opened his banking app. The escrow account showed a zero balance. The full amount had been drawn to issue the check that was now in a plastic bag on a counter inside a bank that wouldn't let him back through the door. Zero. His phone buzzed. Text from Mrs. Patterson. Emma's fine. We're making cookies. Take your time. He typed back. Thanks. Be there by 6. Another buzz. Electric bill. Overdue notice. $53. A month ago, $53 was a crisis. $53 meant choosing between heat and groceries. $53 meant lying awake at night doing math that never worked out. Today. What should have been today? $53 was nothing. A rounding error. But the check was gone. James sat down on a bench at a bus stop. Empty. Nobody waiting. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and stared at the sidewalk. A crack in the concrete ran from his left boot to the curb. He followed it with his eyes, counted the smaller cracks branching off it. 7. Stupid thing to notice, stupid thing to count. The train back to the west side left in 20 minutes. If he caught it, he'd be home by 5:30. Enough time to make dinner. Maybe they'd watch a movie. Emma liked the old animated ones. She'd seen them all 100 times, but she always wanted to watch them again. He could do that. He could sit on the couch and watch a movie and pretend everything was fine. He was good at pretending. He stood up, started to walk toward the train station, then stopped. A black town car was pulling up in front of Summit Federal Bank. Professional driver. The kind of car that costs more per hour than James made in a day. The back door opened and a woman stepped out. Mid-50s, gray suit, red scarf. She moved with the kind of authority that doesn't announce itself. It just exists. She didn't pause on the sidewalk, didn't check her phone, didn't look around. She walked straight to the bank entrance like she owned the building and every building around it. The glass door opened before she reached it. Someone inside had seen her coming. She disappeared inside. James stood on the sidewalk 30 feet from the bank entrance. His train was in 20 minutes. Emma was making cookies. Mrs. Patterson was waiting. He should go. He should catch his train, go home, hold his daughter, eat burnt cookies, and figure out tomorrow when tomorrow came. But his feet didn't move. The same instinct that had told him to answer that forum posting 2 years ago. The same instinct that had told him the contract was real when everything about it said it shouldn't be. That instinct told him to wait, so he sat back down on the bench, and he watched the bank entrance, and he waited. 5 minutes passed. The afternoon light shifted across the pavement. Shadows stretched from the buildings and touched the edge of the bench where James sat with his hands in his pockets and his eyes on the bank entrance. People walked by without seeing him. Same as always, same as everywhere. He'd gotten used to being invisible years ago. The bank door opened. The woman in the gray suit stood in the doorway. She wasn't looking at the street, wasn't looking at traffic or the buildings or the sky. Her eyes moved across the sidewalk with purpose, searching. They found James. She walked toward him, steady, deliberate, no hesitation, stopped 3 feet away and looked at him the way nobody in that bank had looked at him all day, like he was a person. Mr. Rivera. She knew his name. Yes. My name is Carol Hutchins. I'm the regional director for Summit Federal Bank. She extended her hand. James took it, firm grip, practiced but not cold. I believe there's been a serious problem today. You could say that. Would you mind coming back inside? I think we need to have a conversation. James looked past her at the bank. Through the glass doors he could see the lobby, the same marble floors, the same counters, the same place where 10 minutes ago Diane Blackwood had stamped his check with red ink and sealed it in plastic and called it fraud. I'm not sure that's a good idea. I understand your hesitation completely. Carol's voice didn't change, didn't soften or sharpen, just stayed level. But I give you my word, things are going to be handled very differently this time. How did you know what happened? Marcus Cole, the security guard. He called me directly 20 minutes ago, said something about the situation felt wrong and thought I should know immediately. Marcus, the guard who'd hesitated when Diane told him to remove James from the building. The guard who'd said, "Ma'am, maybe we should," before Diane cut him off. The guard who'd touched James's elbow gently when he walked him out. Marcus had picked up the phone. "Miss Blackwood confiscated my check," James said. "I know. She stamped it as fraud evidence." "I know that too. So why would I walk back in there?" Carol didn't blink, didn't try to sell him anything. She spoke the way people speak when they're telling you the truth and don't care if it's comfortable. "Because what happened to you was wrong, and I can't fix it from out here." A bus pulled up to the stop behind them. Doors opened. Nobody got off. The driver looked at James. James waved him on. The doors closed. The bus pulled away. "One condition," James said. "Name it." "She doesn't touch anything related to my account. Not today, not ever." "That won't be a problem." "Why not?" "Because as of 3 minutes ago, Diane Blackwood no longer works at Summit Federal." The words hung between them. James searched Carol's face for performance, for politics, for the kind of corporate smoothness that means nothing and fixes nothing. He didn't find it. "You fired her." "I began termination proceedings. They'll be finalized within the hour." "Because of what she did to me. Because of what she did to a customer. Because she violated 6 different protocols. Because she confiscated property that wasn't hers to confiscate. And because she made a judgment based on appearance instead of facts." Carol paused. "That's not how we operate, or at least it's not how we're supposed to." James looked at the bank one more time. The same stone building, the same brass handles. But something had shifted. He could feel it. "Is she still in there?" "In my office with HR on speakerphone." "Does she know you're out here?" "She knows I left the room. She doesn't know why." "What did she say?" Carol's expression changed. Just barely. The ghost of something cold. That there must be some mistake. That I don't understand what happened. That she was protecting the bank. She really believes she was right. Most people do. Carol gestured toward the entrance. "Will you come back in, Mr. Rivera? I can't fix what she broke if you don't." James thought about Emma, about cookies, about going home and making this become a story he told no one. But then he thought about the way Diane had looked at him, the certainty in her eyes, the smile before she stamped the check, and he thought about the next man who'd walk into that bank wearing the wrong jacket carrying something real and get treated like nothing. "Okay." They walked to the bank together. Carol held the door. James stepped through. This time everyone in the lobby noticed. The lobby was fuller now. End of the workday crowd, lines at every teller window, conversations humming under the high ceiling. But when James walked in beside Carol Hutchins, the humming stopped. Not all at once. It traveled. The teller nearest the door saw them first. She nudged the woman beside her. That woman looked up. Then the customer she was helping turned. Then the next one. Like dominoes falling in slow motion, silence spread across the lobby until the only sound was the quiet hum of the air system and the click of Carol's heels on marble. The businessman was still there. Same spot. Same suit. He recognized James immediately. His face did something complicated. Surprise, then discomfort, then the careful blankness of a man who doesn't want to be noticed. The older couple was still there too. The woman grabbed her husband's arm, squeezed. Diane Blackwood was standing near the management office, red-faced. A man in a cheap suit beside her. HR most likely. Tablet in hand. Already taking notes. She'd been mid-sentence when the door opened. Her mouth was still half-formed around a word she never finished. She saw James and something moved across her face that wasn't fear, wasn't guilt, wasn't regret. It was anger, pure, hard, uncut anger. Because he was back. Because whatever she thought was over wasn't over. Because the man she'd dismissed was standing in her lobby next to the one person in the world she answered to. Carol didn't slow down. She walked straight to Diane, stopped 3 feet away. "Miss Blackwood, I believe you know Mr. Rivera." Diane's jaw was a straight line. "I've already explained the situation to. You'll have your turn to speak. Right now, I need you to listen." The words were quiet, not a whisper, not a shout, the exact volume of someone who doesn't need to raise her voice because everyone is already paying attention. "Mr. Rivera came into this bank approximately 1 hour ago. Is that correct?" Diane stared at her, then at James, then back. "Yes." "And he presented a check for deposit." "A fraudulent check." "I didn't ask you to characterize it. I asked you to confirm that he presented a check." Diane's hands curled into fists at her sides. "Yes, he presented a check." "And what did you do with that check?" "I confiscated it, as is my right under. You confiscated a customer's property without completing verification." Silence. Diane's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Nothing came out. "You called the issuing bank," Carol continued. "They confirmed the account was active, and then you decided that wasn't enough. Why?" Diane looked around the lobby. Every face was turned toward her. Tellers, customers, Marcus by the door, the HR rep with his tablet. She was the center of something she couldn't control, and James could see in her eyes the exact moment she realized it. Because it didn't add up. What didn't add up? The check, the amount, the person presenting it. None of it made sense. What about the person didn't make sense? "Look at him." Diane gestured at James, open palm like she was presenting evidence. "He's wearing a jacket with holes in it. His boots are falling apart. He came in here with no account, no appointment, no identification beyond a driver's license. And he tried to deposit $10 million. You're telling me that doesn't raise a single red flag? Red flags require investigation, not execution. I investigated. You made one phone call, then you made a judgment. Those are two very different things." Diane's face had gone from red to white, the blotchy, uneven white of someone whose blood pressure is climbing by the second. "I used my professional experience, 12 years in banking. I've seen fraud. I know what it looks like." "What does it look like? What fraud? In your professional experience, what does it look like?" Diane hesitated. She felt the trap, but she couldn't see it. "It looks like someone who doesn't belong, someone whose story doesn't match their circumstances, someone who's poor." Carol finished the sentence for her. "That's not what someone from the West Side." "You're twisting my words. I'm repeating them. You told Mr. Rivera in front of this entire lobby that he didn't look like someone who has $10 million. Those were your words, not mine." Diane's mouth thinned. "I said what I observed. And what you observed was a man's clothing, his shoes, his address, and you used those observations to confiscate his property and accuse him of a felony." Carol turned to James. "Mr. Rivera, would you mind showing Miss Blackwood what you showed me outside?" James pulled out his phone, opened his email. The wire transfer notification was at the top, dated 3 days ago. Below it, the contract summary. Below that, the completion certificate from the escrow company. Every piece of documentation clean, time-stamped, verifiable. He held the phone out. Not to Diane, to Carol. Carol took it, read the screen, handed it to the HR rep. He studied it, scrolled through the emails. His face went pale. James watched the color drain out of him in real time. The slow, sick realization of someone who understands exactly how much trouble is standing in this lobby. "This is legitimate," the HR rep said, quiet, almost to himself. Diane reached for the phone. "Let me see that." The HR rep pulled it back, held it away from her. "That could be faked," Diane said. "Anyone can mock up an email. Anyone can create a fake transfer notification. You can buy templates online for Miss Blackwood. Carol's voice cut clean. Stop. I'm trying to explain. You're trying to justify. There's a difference. And every word you say is making this worse. Diane went quiet, but her eyes were burning. James had seen that look before. The look of someone who knows they're wrong but will die before they admit it. Not because they can't see the truth, because admitting the truth would mean admitting what they are. And that's a door most people will never open. Carol turned to the security guard. Marcus, could you come here, please? Marcus walked over, slow, measured. He stopped beside James, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Whether that was intentional or not, James couldn't tell. But he felt it. You were present during this entire interaction, Carol said. Is that correct? Yes, ma'am. Tell me what you saw. Marcus straightened. He didn't look at Diane. He looked at Carol. Mr. Rivera entered the bank at approximately 3:15. He waited in line. When he reached the counter, Miss Blackwood took over the transaction from the assigned teller. She questioned Mr. Rivera about the check. He answered every question calmly and cooperatively. He offered documentation. She refused to review it. She called the issuing bank, confirmed the account was active, then declined to proceed with further verification. She told him the check was fraudulent. He asked to speak with a supervisor. She refused. He asked her to complete the verification. She refused. She instructed me to remove him from the building. Did you? I escorted him to the door, yes, ma'am. And the check? Marcus paused for the first time. He looked at Diane, then looked away. Miss Blackwood confiscated it, stamped it as fraud evidence, sealed it in a plastic bag. In your professional judgment, Marcus, did Mr. Rivera behave in any way that suggested fraud, aggression, deception, anything at all? Marcus shook his head slowly. No, ma'am. He was the calmest person in the building. Didn't raise his voice. Didn't make any threatening movements. Didn't resist when I escorted him out. He asked for his property back and was denied. He paused again, then added something that nobody expected. I've worked security for 11 years, 6 in the military, 5 in private sector. I've seen people try to pass fraudulent checks. I've seen con artists and I've seen thieves. Mr. Rivera wasn't any of those things. He was a man trying to deposit a check, and he was treated like a criminal because of the way he was dressed. That's why I called you. The lobby was dead silent. James felt something move through his chest. Not pride, not vindication, gratitude. The kind that hurts because you didn't expect it, because you'd already accepted that nobody was going to stand up. Marcus had stood up. Carol turned back to Diane. Would you like to respond? Diane was vibrating. James could see it, a fine tremor in her hands, a tightness in her neck that made the tendons stand out. She looked at Marcus like he'd betrayed her, looked at the HR rep like he'd abandoned her, looked around the lobby at the customers and tellers, and saw what she really was in that moment. Alone. I was doing my job, she said. Her voice cracked on the last word. I was protecting this bank. I was protecting these customers. Do you know how many fraud attempts we get every month? Do you know what happens when one gets through? I'm the one who answers for it. I'm the one who gets called into the regional office and asked why I let a fake check clear. I'm the one who... You're the one who confiscated a legitimate check worth $10 million. Carol said it like she was reading a grocery list. You're the one who publicly accused an innocent man of a felony. You're the one who made a judgment based on a jacket and a pair of boots instead of doing your job. My job is to use judgment. Your job is to verify, to investigate, to follow protocol. Your job is to serve every person who walks through that door regardless of what they're wearing, where they come from, or what they look like. That's not my opinion. That's Summit Federal Policy. Page 1, paragraph 1. Diane's eyes were wet. Not from sadness, from rage. The kind of rage that comes when the walls close in and there's nowhere left to go. If he'd been wearing a suit, if he'd driven up in a Mercedes, you wouldn't be standing here. Nobody would. I would have processed that check and everyone would have moved on with their day. But because I raised a concern, because I did my due diligence on someone who didn't fit the profile. Carol repeated the word like it was evidence. What profile exactly? Diane didn't answer. Say it, Carol said. You've been dancing around it for an hour. You said it to Mr. Rivera. You said it in front of 30 witnesses. Say it now. Diane's chin lifted. Something defiant. Something broken. People who have $10 million don't look like that. They don't come from the West Side. They don't wear second-hand jackets. They don't walk into banks without accounts. That's not judgment. That's reality. The words fell into the lobby like stones into water, and everyone felt the ripple. Carol nodded slowly. Thank you. That makes this much easier. She turned to the HR rep. Final termination effective immediately. Cause confiscation of customer property, violation of verification protocols, discriminatory conduct, and gross misconduct. The HR rep started typing. His fingers moved fast. He'd been ready. Diane's face collapsed. Not the slow crumble of realization. The sudden violent fracture of someone who thought they were standing on solid ground and just felt it give way. You can't do this. I can, and I am. I have rights, union protection. I've given this bank 12 years, all of which will be explained to you in detail by HR. Right now I need your employee badge, your keys, your access cards. This is insane. Your badge, Miss Blackwood. I was protecting the bank. You were protecting your assumptions. There's a difference, and that difference cost this bank a customer's trust, a legitimate transaction, and now a 12-year employee. Your badge. Diane stared at her. 5 seconds. 10. The lobby held its breath. James watched her face cycle through everything. Denial, anger, bargaining, fury, all of it compressed into a few heartbeats. Then she reached inside her jacket, pulled out a lanyard with an ID badge, slapped it into Carol's palm so hard the sound echoed. Keys next. Dropped, not handed, dropped into Carol's open hand like they were poison. Then a security access card slid across the counter with 2 fingers. Your personal items will be packed and delivered to your home address, Carol said. You are not to return to this building. Any questions regarding severance or final compensation should be directed to HR. 12 years, Diane said. Her voice was barely a whisper now. I gave 12 years to this bank. And in one afternoon you threw away every bit of goodwill you'd built. Diane flinched. Actually flinched like the words were physical. She looked around the lobby one last time. At the customers who'd watched her manage this branch for years. At the tellers she'd supervised. At the brass fixtures and marble floors that had been her domain. She was looking at all of it the way you look at something you'll never see again. Then her eyes found James. I hope you're happy. James looked at her. This woman who'd confiscated 2 years of his work. Who'd called him a fraud in front of strangers. Who'd tried to destroy his daughter's future and called it procedure. I'm not, he said. I just wanted to deposit a check. Something in his voice hit her. He saw it land. A flicker in her expression. Fast, almost invisible. Not guilt, not apology. But maybe for 1/2 second the beginning of understanding. The first hairline crack in the wall she'd built around her certainty. Then it was gone. Marcus, Carol said, please escort Miss Blackwood out. Marcus walked to Diane. He didn't grab her arm, didn't rush her. He touched her elbow the same way he'd touched James's an hour ago, gently. Ma'am, this way. They walked toward the door. The lobby watched. Every customer, every teller. The businessman who'd laughed. The older couple who'd stared. All of them watching the cost of being wrong walk across that marble floor in heels that clicked once for every heartbeat. The glass door opened. Diane stepped through. Marcus followed. The door closed behind them, and Diane Blackwood was gone. The lobby stayed quiet for 3 full seconds, the longest 3 seconds James had ever counted. Then Carol turned to the room. I want to apologize to everyone who had to witness that, but I also want to be very clear about something. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Summit Federal Bank serves everyone. Everyone. Regardless of how you're dressed, regardless of where you're from, regardless of what you look like. That is not a policy. That is a promise. She pulled business cards from her jacket pocket, started handing them to people. If you ever feel that you've been treated unfairly in any branch of this bank, you call me directly. My personal number is on this card. I will answer. The older woman took a card. Her hand was trembling. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. The businessman took one too. He didn't make eye contact with anyone. He put the card in his pocket and went back to his teller window without a word. An hour ago that man had laughed. Now he couldn't look up from the floor. James watched him go. Carol turned to James. Her face was calm, controlled, but there was something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Not exhaustion, not satisfaction, something heavier. I have someone I want you to meet. A door opened. A man walked in. Mid-60s, silver hair, reading glasses hanging from a chain around his neck. He moved slowly but with intention, the way people move when they've been doing something for a long time and don't need to rush anymore. He extended his hand. Mr. Rivera, my name is George Palmer. I'm a senior account manager from our downtown branch. I've been briefed on what happened today, and I want you to know I'm embarrassed. Personally embarrassed. This is not the bank I've spent 30 years building. It's not your fault. Maybe not. But it's my responsibility. George's handshake was warm, both hands. From this moment forward, I'm handling your account personally. When your check arrives tomorrow, I'll process it myself. Here's my direct number. He pulled a card from his jacket pocket. Cream-colored, simple, just a name and a phone number. You call me for anything. Questions, concerns. If someone looks at you sideways in any branch of this bank, you call me, and I will handle it. James took the card, ran his thumb across the printed name. George Palmer, direct line. Thank you. It's my pleasure, sir. Sir, that word. The same word Diane had used like a weapon, the same 2 syllables she'd aimed at him like a slap. But from George Palmer, standing in that office with his reading glasses and his warm handshake and his 30 years of doing this job the way it should be done from him, the word landed differently. It landed the way it was supposed to land, with weight, with respect, with the simple human acknowledgement that the person standing in front of you matters. James felt it in his chest. A loosening. Something that had been clenched since the moment Diane held up his check and said, "This is a joke." Something deep and tight and heavy. Released. Not all the way, not completely, but enough. Enough to breathe. "Let's get your account set up," George said. "I'll need your ID, a few signatures, standard intake. Should take about 20 minutes. That's it. That's it. No interrogation, no background check on your wardrobe." George's eyes crinkled. "Just paperwork." They went through it page by page. George explained every form, every clause, every fee structure. He didn't rush, didn't condescend. Asked James if he had questions. Waited for answers. Treated the process like what it was supposed to be. A service, not a test. When they finished, George gathered the papers, tapped them straight on the desk, slid them into a folder with James's name written on the tab. "Accounts active. When the check arrives tomorrow, we deposit it. Standard hold for large deposits is 5 business days, but given the circumstances, I've spoken with Carol and we're expediting clearance. You'll have full access to the funds within 48 hours. 48 hours. Thursday. Thursday meant Emma could have new shoes by the weekend. Thursday meant he could pay the electric bill and the rent, and maybe start looking at apartments in neighborhoods where the heat worked all winter. Thursday meant everything. "I'll see you tomorrow morning, Mr. Rivera. I'll be here at 9. "I'll be here at 9. "Good man." George smiled. Genuine. The kind of smile that comes from someone who still believes in doing things right. Carol had more papers. Incident report. Formal complaint. A statement for the bank's internal investigation. "You don't have to file these, but I recommend it. For the record. The record that proves what happened. The record that makes sure it doesn't happen to someone else." James signed everything, read every word first. Carol didn't rush him. When he hesitated over a paragraph about potential legal remedies, she said something he'd remember. "Take your time. This isn't a deadline. This is your story." When they were finished, it was 7:15. Almost 4 hours since he'd first walked into this bank with an envelope in his jacket pocket. 4 hours that had contained more than some years. "Can I ask you something?" Carol said. "Sure." "When she was accusing you, when she was confiscating the check, you didn't fight back. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't threaten her or demand anything. You just stood there. Why?" James was quiet for a long time. He looked at his hands. Working hands. The calluses on his fingers from years of typing. Not the glamorous kind of callus. Not guitar strings or rock climbing. Keyboard calluses. The kind nobody notices. "Because they'd already decided who I was," he said. "Diane, the people in line, the businessman who laughed, all of them. They looked at me and they saw what they expected to see. And nothing I said was going to change that. Not in that moment. But you were right. Being right doesn't help when everyone in the room has already made up their mind." The words came easier now, like he'd been storing them for years and finally had permission to let them out. "I've been in rooms like that my whole life. Job interviews where they've decided before I sit down. Parent-teacher meetings where they talk to me slower because of the way I'm dressed. Stores where someone follows me down the aisle because I don't look like I can afford what I'm touching. You learn after a while that arguing with a closed mind is like talking to a wall. The wall doesn't move. You just lose your voice. That's a hard way to live. It's the way most people live. We just don't talk about it." Carol set down her pen. "For what it's worth, and I know it's not worth much right now, you shouldn't have to live that way. Not in my bank." "Your bank," James said. "What about the grocery store, the school, the apartment complex, the DM Vive? Every other place where someone takes one look and decides what I am. I can't fix all of those." "I know, but I can fix this one." "Then fix it." James met her eyes. "Not for me. I got lucky. I had Marcus. I had you. The next person might not have either. The next person who walks in here carrying something real, something they worked their whole life for and gets told it's fake because they're wearing the wrong shoes. Fix it for that person." Carol held his gaze. "I will." James walked through the lobby one last time. Quieter now. Most of the customers had gone. A few tellers were closing out their registers. Marcus stood at his post by the door. As James passed, Marcus straightened, nodded. "Mr. Rivera." James stopped. "Marcus, I'm glad you came back." "I almost didn't." "I know. That's why I called." They looked at each other. Two men who didn't have much in common on the surface. Different jobs, different lives, different sides of the lobby. But in that moment they understood each other perfectly. "Thank you." Marcus shook his head. "Don't thank me for doing what everyone in this building should have done an hour ago." James extended his hand. Marcus took it. Firm. Solid. The handshake of men who mean it. Sometimes doing the right thing doesn't make you a hero. It just makes you decent. And decent shouldn't be rare enough to deserve medals. Carol was waiting by the door. "If you change your mind about legal action, call me anytime. The bank's legal team will work with you, not against you." "I appreciate that." "And Mr. Rivera—" She paused. Her voice shifted. Softer. Less corporate. More human. "I'm sorry you had to teach us this lesson. You shouldn't have had to." James looked at the lobby one last time. The marble floors where his dignity had been questioned. The counter where Diane had stamped his check with red ink. The space where 30 people had watched and judged and decided he was guilty based on nothing but appearance. "Just make sure the next person who walks in looking like me doesn't have to teach it again." "I will. I promise you that." He pushed through the brass-handled door and stepped into the night air. Colder now. The temperature had dropped with the sun. James pulled his jacket tighter. Same jacket, same collar, same man. Started walking toward the train station. His phone buzzed. Text from Emma. 3 messages while he'd been inside. "We made chocolate chip and peanut butter." Mrs. Patterson burned one batch, but don't tell her I said that, LOL. How many cookies do you want me to save? He typed back. All of them. 3 dots appeared immediately. Dad, that's like 20 cookies. I'm very hungry. Okay, but I already ate 4. He smiled, the first real smile in hours. Slipped the phone back in his pocket and kept walking. The train platform was nearly empty, late enough that the rush had passed, early enough that the night shift hadn't started. James stood with his hands in his pockets and watched his breath fog in the cold air. A woman passed him reading something on her phone. Didn't look up. A man in a suit stood 20 feet away checking his watch every 30 seconds like he could make the train arrive faster through sheer impatience. The train came. Doors opened. James found a seat this time, sat by the window and watched the city fall away. Buildings shrank. Glass and steel gave way to brick and tired storefronts. Streetlights that flickered. The West Side. His neighborhood. The place Diane had said like a diagnosis. He pulled out Carol's business card, turned it over in his fingers. Embossed letters, heavy stock, the kind of card that said someone important had touched it. He put it in his wallet next to George Palmer's card. 2 pieces of paper that proved something had shifted today, that someone had seen what happened and decided it mattered. The train pulled into his station. James stepped onto the platform. Cold air hit him. 3 blocks to his apartment. Same walk he'd made 1,000 times. But tonight felt different. Not because anything around him had changed. The same cracked sidewalk, the same broken streetlight on the corner, the same building with peeling paint and a landlord who didn't fix water stains. But tomorrow morning a courier would arrive with a new check, and within 48 hours $10 million would clear into an account with his name on it. And everything after that would be different. Mrs. Patterson opened the door before he reached it. She'd been watching for him. There he is. Emma's been checking the window every 5 minutes. Sorry I'm so late. Don't apologize. We had a wonderful time. She lowered her voice. Conspiratorial. She taught me a card game I'm fairly certain she invented the rules for as we went along. That sounds about right. She's in the living room. Fair warning, there's flour on the ceiling. Don't ask me how. Behind Mrs. Patterson, a small figure appeared in the hallway. Brown hair in a ponytail that had mostly come undone. Cookie crumbs on her shirt and her chin, and somehow in her eyebrows. She saw James and her whole face opened up. Pure, unguarded joy that only children can produce. The kind that doesn't hold anything back because it hasn't learned to yet. Dad. She ran at him full speed, hit him at the waist and squeezed. James picked her up. 47 pounds and growing. Too big for this, really. His back protested. But he did it anyway. Held her while she wrapped her arms around his neck, and everything that had happened that day compressed into something small and distant and irrelevant. Because this was real. This was what mattered. The rest was just noise. We made so many cookies, Dad. I heard. Mrs. Patterson says I'm a natural baker. Mrs. Patterson is a very smart woman. Are you hungry? You look hungry. Starving. Good, because I saved you a whole plate. He set her down. Mrs. Patterson tried to refuse payment for the extra hours. James insisted. She took it the way she always did, like she was doing him a favor by accepting. Put on her coat, gathered her purse. At the door she stopped. Ethan. She only used his first name when she was being serious. Are you all right? You look like you've been through something. Long day. She studied him for another moment. Nodded. You know where I am if you need anything. I know. Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. The door closed. It was just James and Emma now. The apartment was small. It was always small. But tonight, knowing what was coming tomorrow, knowing that within 48 hours his account would hold more money than he'd ever imagined, the smallness of this apartment didn't feel like a cage. It felt like a cocoon, the last night of something, the end of one life and the beginning of another. Dad, cookies now. Yes, ma'am. They sat at the kitchen table. Emma had arranged the cookies on a plate with the kind of deliberate artistry that 9-year-olds bring to things that matter to them. Chocolate chip on the left, peanut butter on the right, a gap in the middle where the 4 she'd already eaten used to be. "Try the chocolate chip first. Those are the best ones." James picked one up, bit into it. Warm, sweet, slightly burnt on the edges. The chocolate chips were unevenly distributed. Some bites had 4, some had none. It was by any objective standard an imperfect cookie. It was the best thing he'd tasted in 2 years. Perfect. Really? Emma's eyes went wide. Mrs. Patterson said we used too much butter. There's no such thing as too much butter. She grinned, picked up a peanut butter cookie and took a bite, chewed thoughtfully. Dad? Yeah. How was your day? The question hit him somewhere he wasn't prepared for, not the words. Emma asked him that every night. But tonight, with everything that had happened still sitting in his chest like a stone, the simple kindness of his 9-year-old daughter asking how his day went nearly broke him. He looked at her, cookie in her hand, crumbs on the table, that gap-toothed smile she'd have for maybe another year before the adult teeth came in. Complicated. Good complicated or bad complicated? He thought about it, really thought about it. Both. It started bad, got worse, and then it got better. What happened? Grown-up stuff. You always say that, because it usually is. Was it scary? He paused. A little bit, yeah. But you're okay. I'm okay. Good. She held out a peanut butter cookie. These fix everything. He took it. She watched him eat it with the intense satisfaction of a chef observing someone enjoy her work. Then she hopped off her chair and went to the living room. He heard the TV click on, the opening music of one of her animated movies, the one about the fish. She'd seen it 100 times. She'd watch it 100 more. Dad, come on. It's starting. James cleared the table, put the remaining cookies in a container, wiped down the counter. Normal things, routine things, the small mechanical actions that hold a life together. Then he went to the living room and sat down on the couch. Emma immediately pressed herself against his side, her head on his arm, feet tucked under her. Within 10 minutes her breathing changed, slowed. Her body got heavier. The cookie in her hand tilted. James caught it before it fell. She was asleep. James sat there. The movie played. Colors moved across the screen. He wasn't watching. He was looking at Emma's face, the way her eyelashes rested on her cheeks, the way her mouth was slightly open, the small scar on her chin from when she'd fallen off her bike last summer and he'd carried her 6 blocks to urgent care because he couldn't afford an ambulance. He thought about what Carol had asked him. Why didn't you fight back? He'd given her one answer. The truth, but not the whole truth. The whole truth was harder. The whole truth was this: he didn't fight back because of Emma, because every choice he'd made for the past 4 years had been about her. Every decision filtered through one question. What does she need? She needed a father who came home, who didn't get arrested in a bank lobby, who didn't make a scene that ended up on someone's phone and then on the internet and then in a courtroom. She needed a father who could walk away from something wrong and still walk toward something right. So that's what he did. He walked away, and then he walked back, and the difference between those 2 walks was everything. His phone buzzed. Email notification. He opened it with one hand, careful not to wake Emma. The subject line made his chest tighten. From Meridian Capital Holdings, Mr. Rivera, we have been informed of the incident involving your payment instrument at Summit Federal Bank Millbrook Heights branch. A replacement check has been issued and will be delivered via secure courier to your residence tomorrow morning, March 16th by 9 a.m. We sincerely regret any inconvenience and wish to assure you that the full amount of $10 million remains allocated and confirmed. Please contact us if you require any additional documentation. It has been a privilege working with you. A privilege working with you. From people who had never met him, who communicated only through encrypted channels and anonymous contracts. Even they, people whose entire business model was built on invisibility, even they had reached out. Even they had said, "We see you. What happened to you was wrong." James closed the email, put the phone down, looked at Emma sleeping against his side. "Hey, sweetheart," he whispered. "Time for bed." She stirred, mumbled something, didn't open her eyes. He picked her up, carried her down the short hallway to her room, laid her on the bed, pulled the covers up. Her room was small, just big enough for a twin bed, a dresser, and a bookshelf he'd built from scrap lumber. The bookshelf leaned slightly to the left. He kept meaning to fix it, never got around to it. He tucked the blanket around her shoulders. She rolled onto her side, pulled the covers to her chin, sighed. That deep, full-body sigh that children make when they're completely safe and completely comfortable and don't know enough about the world yet to understand how rare that feeling is. "Dad?" Eyes still closed. "Yes, sweetheart." "Are we okay?" The question came out of nowhere. Or maybe it didn't. Maybe she'd felt something today. Some vibration in the air. Some shift in the frequency of their small life. Kids sense things. They don't always have words for it, but they feel the current change. "We're okay." "Promise?" "Promise." "Okay." She pulled the blanket tighter. "Love you." "Love you too, Sophie. More than you know." "I know, Dad." Her voice was already fading. "I always know." She was asleep in seconds. James stood in the doorway and watched her breathe. Counted 5 breaths. 10. Then he pulled her door almost closed. Left the crack she liked. Just enough light from the hallway to keep the dark from being total. He walked back to the kitchen, sat at the table. The apartment was quiet. The refrigerator hummed its diesel hum. A car passed outside. Headlights swept across the wall and disappeared. The kitchen faucet dripped. 1 drop every 4 seconds. He'd been meaning to fix that too. He pulled George Palmer's card from his pocket, set it on the table, pulled out Carol Hutchins' card, set that beside it. Then he pulled out the overdue electric bill from where he'd left it this morning. $53. Set that beside the cards. 3 pieces of paper on a kitchen table. One represented a man who'd treated him with respect. One represented a woman who'd fought for him. One represented the life he'd been living. The $53 life. The counting every dollar life. The life where a utility bill could keep him up at night. Tomorrow that life would begin to change. The check would arrive. George would process it. Within 48 hours the money would be in his account. Real money. The kind that doesn't just pay bills. It erases the fear behind them. But tonight the money wasn't here yet. Tonight he was still the man in the worn jacket. Still the guy on the west side with $40 in checking and an electric bill he couldn't pay. And that was okay. Because that man, the one Diane Blackwood had looked at and dismissed, the one the businessman had laughed at, the one the older woman had pulled her purse away from, that man had built something extraordinary. Had raised a daughter who saved him cookies and asked if he was okay and said "I love you" without being asked. Had walked into a place that didn't want him and walked out with his dignity intact. The money would change his circumstances, but it wouldn't change who he was. And who he was, who he'd always been, was enough. He picked up the electric bill, looked at it one more time. $53. Overdue. Past due. Final notice. In 2 days he could pay that $53 10,000 times over and not feel it. But tonight it was still the difference between heat and no heat. Tonight it was still real. He left it on the table. He'd pay it Thursday, along with everything else. James cleaned up the kitchen, washed Emma's cookie bowls, wiped flour off the counter, and yes, somehow off the ceiling, put the cookie container in the cabinet, turned off the lights. He walked to his bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed. The same bed he'd sat on this morning at 5:28, staring at the water stain on the ceiling, getting ready for a day he thought would be simple. Walk in, deposit a check. Walk out, come home, make dinner, watch a movie. Nothing about this day had been simple. He lay back, stared at the ceiling, The water stain was still there, boot-shaped, 14 months and counting. He wondered if after Thursday he'd have it fixed, or if he'd move to a new apartment, one without water stains, one with heat that worked, one with a bedroom for Emma that was big enough for a desk where she could do her homework without spreading it across the kitchen table. He could do that now. He could do anything now. But right now, in this apartment, in this bed with his daughter sleeping 20 feet away and cookies in the cabinet and a phone full of texts with too many exclamation points right now, he didn't need anything else. He closed his eyes. Sleep came faster than he expected. No dreams he could remember, just darkness and rest and the knowledge that tomorrow morning everything would begin again. He woke at 5:28. No alarm. His body knew. He opened his eyes and looked at the ceiling. The water stain hadn't moved. The apartment was cold. The radiator clanked but produced no heat. Some things were exactly the same as yesterday. But everything was different. James got up, made coffee. The machine clicked twice and wheezed and started dripping. He pulled out a brown paper bag, wrote Emma's name in black marker, made the sandwich, cut the apple, put in the juice box. Same lunch as always. Last time he'd make it because he had to. Next time would be because he chose to. 6:15. Emma's door opened. She appeared in the kitchen doorway with her hair down. He sat her in the chair and did her ponytail. 30 seconds, eyes half shut, muscle memory. They ate breakfast in comfortable silence. Emma poured cereal. James poured milk. Neither of them mentioned that today was different, that in 3 hours a courier would arrive with a check that would change their lives. Emma didn't know about it, and that was fine. She'd know when she needed to know. 7:40, 3 blocks to the bus stop. The same parents were already there. Same Volvos, same Audis, same takeout coffee cups with logos. They nodded at James the way they always did. Acknowledgement without interest. But James saw them differently now. Not with anger or resentment, just clarity. These people weren't bad. They just didn't see him. Didn't see past the jacket to the man wearing it. And tomorrow when he showed up in the same jacket with the same boots, they still wouldn't see him. Because seeing people requires asking questions they hadn't learned to ask. The bus came. Emma hugged him. "Love you, Dad." "Love you too, sweetheart." She climbed the steps, found her seat, waved through the window. James waved back. The bus turned the corner, and she was gone. He walked home alone. Faster this time. He had somewhere to be at 9. The courier arrived at 8:53. James was waiting by the window, watching. The car pulled up. Black sedan, professional. The courier got out with a slim envelope, walked to the building entrance. James met him at the door. "James Rivera." "That's me." "I'll need to see ID." James showed his driver's license. The courier checked it against his tablet, nodded. "Sign here, please." James signed. The courier handed him the envelope. "Have a good day, sir." Sir. That word again. This time from someone who didn't know him. Didn't know about yesterday or the bank or Diane Blackwood. Just a courier doing his job with basic professionalism, treating James the way people should be treated, like he mattered. "You too." James carried the envelope inside. Didn't open it in the hallway. Didn't open it in the elevator. Didn't open it until he was sitting at his kitchen table with the door locked and the apartment quiet. He broke the seal, pulled out the check, same amount, same bank, different check number, but real, legitimate, verified. He held it in his hands and felt the weight of everything it represented. 2 years of work, 4 years of struggle, 9 years of being a father who refused to quit. All of it compressed into a single piece of paper. He put it in the white envelope, put the envelope in his jacket pocket, locked the apartment, walked to the train station. The bank opened at 9. James arrived at 8:55. The same brass handles, the same glass doors, the same marble lobby. But this time when he walked in, George Palmer was waiting. "Mr. Rivera, right on time." "Wouldn't want to keep you waiting." George smiled. "Let's get you taken care of." They walked to a private office. George closed the door, took the check with both hands like it was important, because it was. He examined it, front and back, held it up to the light. Not because he doubted James, because he was being thorough, because this was how it should have been done the first time. Everything looks perfect. I'll process this immediately. The funds should be available by end of day Thursday. I'll call you personally when they clear. Thank you. No thanks necessary. This is how banking is supposed to work. George walked the check to a teller he clearly trusted, spoke to her quietly. She nodded, took the check with the same careful respect George had shown, scanned it, entered information into her computer, looked up and gave George a thumbs up. We're all set, George said. Is there anything else you need? Actually, yes. James pulled out his phone, pulled up the electric bill. I need to pay this. $53. George didn't blink, didn't smirk, didn't show any reaction to the fact that a man with $10 million clearing into his account was worried about a $53 electric bill. He just said, "We can take care of that right now," and helped James set up the payment. Because George Palmer understood something that Diane Blackwood never would. That $53 and $10 million weren't different kinds of money. They were different circumstances requiring the same basic respect. When it was done, James stood to leave. George walked him to the door, shook his hand. Welcome to Summit Federal, Mr. Rivera. We're glad to have you. James walked out of the bank and into the morning sun. The city was waking up around him, people heading to work, cars moving through intersections, the rhythm of a Thursday in March. He pulled out his phone and texted Mrs. Patterson. Can Emma stay with you after school today? I need to take her somewhere. The response came in 30 seconds. Of course. Everything okay? Everything's great. I'm taking her shoe shopping. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. That's wonderful, James. She'll be so happy. He put his phone away and started walking. Not to the train station. Not yet. He walked 3 blocks to a discount shoe store he'd passed 100 times. Went inside, found the children's section, looked at shoes that would actually fit his daughter, shoes she could choose based on what she liked instead of what cost the least. A saleswoman approached. Can I help you find something? I need girls' shoes, size 3. Sure thing. What style is she interested in? James realized he had no idea. Emma had never been allowed to have preferences about shoes before. They bought what fit and what they could afford, and that was the end of the conversation. I don't know, he said. I guess we'll have to ask her. The saleswoman smiled. That's usually the best way. When are you bringing her in? After school today. Perfect. We'll be here. James left the store and walked to the train, rode it back to the west side, got off at his stop, walked the 3 blocks home, sat in his apartment and waited for 3:15 when Emma's school day ended, waited for Mrs. Patterson to call and say Emma was ready, waited to tell his daughter that today they were going to do something they'd never done before, pick out shoes just because she wanted them. The phone rang at 3:20. She's ready whenever you are. Be there in 5 minutes. He walked to Mrs. Patterson's apartment. Emma came running when she saw him. Dad, Mrs. Patterson said we're going somewhere. That's right. Where? It's a surprise. I love surprises. They took the bus downtown. Emma sat by the window and watched the buildings go by, asking questions about everything. Why was that building so tall? Who lived in those apartments? Could they get ice cream after the surprise? James answered every question, made up stories about the buildings, promised ice cream, felt lighter than he had in years. They got off at 5th Street, walked 2 blocks. Emma saw the shoe store, and her steps slowed. Dad. Yeah, sweetheart. Are we? We're getting you new shoes. Really? Really? Can I pick? That question hit him harder than it should have. Can I pick? Like choosing was a privilege she didn't expect to have. You can pick anything you want. Emma's eyes went wide. She grabbed his hand and pulled him into the store. The saleswoman recognized James. You must be Emma. Hi, I need shoes. Well, you came to the right place. What do you like? For 20 minutes, Emma tried on every shoe in her size. Sneakers with lights, sandals with sparkles, boots that went up to her knees. She kept looking at James like she expected him to say no, to tell her they cost too much, to pick the cheapest pair and leave. But James just kept saying, try those too, whatever you want. She settled on sneakers, purple with silver stripes and laces that glowed in the dark. $48, $3 more than the discount shoes he'd been planning to buy. $3 that used to matter and now didn't matter at all. These ones, Dad. Can I have these ones? Of course. The saleswoman boxed them up. James paid. Emma carried the box like it contained treasure. They walked out of the store and she stopped on the sidewalk, looked up at him with eyes that were too serious for 9 years old. Dad, are you sure we can afford this? And James knelt down so he was at her eye level, so she could see his face when he told her the truth. Yes, sweetheart, we can afford it, and things are going to be different now. Better. I promise. What changed? I finished the work I was doing, the important thing, and it paid well, really well. Well enough that you don't have to worry about whether we can afford shoes anymore, or anything else. Emma processed this. So we're not poor anymore. The question broke his heart because it meant she'd known all along, had understood their situation in ways he'd tried to hide from her, had carried that knowledge quietly and never complained. No, baby, we're not poor anymore. She hugged him, right there on the sidewalk, wrapped her arms around his neck and squeezed. I'm glad, Dad. Not because of the shoes, because you worked so hard, and you deserve good things to happen. Sometimes children understand the world better than adults ever will. Sometimes they cut straight to the truth that matters. That good things happening to good people isn't about money. It's about fairness, about work being rewarded, about the universe occasionally getting it right. They got ice cream, 2 scoops each, sat on a bench and watched people walk by. Emma kept the shoebox on her lap, kept looking inside to make sure the shoes were still real. Can I wear them now? Of course. She changed into them right there on the bench, put her old shoes in the box, stood up and walked in circles testing them out. They don't hurt, Dad. They actually don't hurt. That sentence, that simple observation, they don't hurt. Like pain had been so normal she'd stopped noticing it until it was gone. James made another promise to himself right there, not to God or fate or anything external, just to himself. To the part of him that refused to accept that his daughter should suffer for circumstances she didn't create. She will never go without again, never wear shoes that hurt or eat the same lunch because we can't afford variety or sit in a cold apartment because the heat doesn't work. Never. Whatever it takes, however long this money lasts. She gets to be a kid who doesn't have to worry, who gets to pick things because she likes them, who gets to just be 9 years old. They rode the bus home. Emma fell asleep against his shoulder, her new shoes on her feet, the glow-in-the-dark laces already starting to shine in the dimming light. James carried her inside, put her to bed without waking her. She didn't even stir when he pulled off the new shoes, just rolled over and slept the sleep of children who trust completely that they're safe. He went to his room, checked his email. Nothing from the bank yet. The money wouldn't clear until tomorrow. But it would clear. George had promised. And unlike yesterday's promises, this one he could trust. James lay in bed and stared at the water stain on the ceiling. Tomorrow he'd call a contractor, or maybe a realtor. Start looking at places where the ceiling didn't leak and the heat worked and Emma could have her own room big enough for all her things. But tonight, he was still here, in this apartment, in this bed, in this life that was ending and beginning at the same time. His phone buzzed. Text from George Palmer. Funds cleared early. Account active. Congratulations, Mr. Rivera. James read the message 3 times, opened his banking app, watched the screen load, saw the number appear. Available balance $10 million. $10 million. Real. Cleared. His. He closed the app, set the phone down, and breathed. Everything had changed. But in the most important ways, nothing had changed at all. He was still James Rivera, still Emma's father, still the man who'd built something valuable while the world wasn't looking, still someone who measured worth by different metrics than money. The difference was now the world would have to look. Now when he walked into rooms, people would make different assumptions, would treat him different, not because he'd changed, because their perception of him had changed, and that was the lesson he'd carry from this day. That perception isn't reality. That the man they dismissed yesterday was the same man they'd respect tomorrow. That dignity doesn't come from bank accounts. It comes from knowing who you are when nobody's watching. He closed his eyes, thought about Emma sleeping down the hall in shoes that didn't hurt, thought about Diane Blackwood learning that sometimes the people you underestimate are the ones who prove you wrong, thought about Marcus making a phone call because his conscience wouldn't let him stay silent, thought about Carol and George treating him like he mattered even when he looked like he didn't, thought about the truth that most people spend their whole lives avoiding. You can't tell who someone is by looking at them. You have to ask, have to listen, have to see past the surface to the person underneath. Some people never learn that lesson. Diane Blackwood probably never would, but maybe someone in that lobby yesterday had watched what happened and learned something. Maybe the next time they saw someone who didn't look like they belonged, they'd pause, wonder, ask questions instead of making assumptions. Maybe that was worth more than $10 million. The knowledge that your struggle taught someone else to be better, that your pain had purpose, that sometimes the hardest days lead to the most important changes. James didn't know if any of that was true, but lying there in the dark, listening to his daughter breathe, feeling the weight of responsibility and possibility settle into his bones, he chose to believe it. Because belief doesn't require proof, it just requires hope. And after everything, that's what he had. Hope that tomorrow would be different, that Emma would grow up knowing her father kept his promises, that doing the right thing still mattered even when it was hard, that being enough was finally actually genuinely enough. He fell asleep with that thought. Woke at 5:28 the next morning, looked at the ceiling, made coffee, packed Emma's lunch, and started the first day of their new life with the same routine as always. Because some things are worth keeping. Some rhythms matter more than money. Some moments of normalcy anchor you when everything else is changing. The check cleared. The money sat in his account. The world kept turning. And James Rivera, father and builder and man who refused to break, kept showing up, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one moment at a time, exactly the way he'd always done it,